Lord, I call to you, hasten to me, listen to my plea when I call. Let my prayer be incense before you, my uplifting hands on evening offering.
You're tuned into Holy Smokes, Cigars, Catholicism, and Conversation. Let my prayer arise in thy sight as incense. I'm your host, Dustin Quick, and this is episode 120, East to West Theology, with Dennis G. and Kyle Dean. Guys, before we jump into tonight's episode, just a word about my sponsor, Havana Palace on Huron Church Road in Windsor, Ontario, for the best service and finest cigars. Go see Caesar and Eli. They treat all their customers like family. If you would be so kind as to go to facebook.com/Havana Palace and give their page a like, I would greatly appreciate it. And if you're interested in Holy Smokes merch, such as this cup, you can't really, I don't know if you can see it too well. I'll show you the logo. Here's the logo. And there's many colors, and there's hoodies and t-shirts, decals, coffee cups as well. You can go to www.catholictothemax.com/Holy Smokes if you're interested in getting some merch, and then just hit the or punch in the code SMOKES at checkout, and you get 10% off your order. Okay, so I just wanted to mention those couple of things. And I'm going to introduce my friends Dennis G. and Kyle Dean of East to West Theology. Guys, how are you doing this evening?
Doing great. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I'm happy to have you guys here with me.
Happy to be on.
Yeah, likewise, man. Thank you so much.
No problem. So this is the first time I've had you guys on the channel. So if you wouldn't mind, before we talk about your apostolate, can we just get a little bit of an introduction? Both of you guys can just kind of, whoever wants to go first can go ahead, and then.
Well, the sun rises in the east.
And it sets in the west, so I'll go first.
That's true. Okay.
Yeah, so we're East to West Theology. Our mission is to spread both Eastern and Western Catholicism and have that unity that Jesus prayed for to the Father, that all may be one as he and the Father are one. And so we have the great honor and blessing to promote that unity. We don't like to spread any discord, but we focus on some of the divisions as well within the West and the East, and how we can find unity amongst those, especially when you deal with the different, like schismatics and whatnot, in both camps, right, of East and West.
Sure.
So, but yeah, we've been doing this for over a year now, and we just look forward to continue this by God's grace. And just to confirm, I'm representing the Byzantine Church, and Kyle Dean, where the sun sets in the west, is representing the Latin Church.
Yes, indeed. And yeah, just a little bit about ourselves. So Dennis G is a master of theology, and we got involved in young adult ministry here in the Western New York region, the Buffalo Diocese, with an apostolate called Dynamis Western New York, that I am currently the minister general of. And over the course of many years of doing young adult ministry together on the leadership team, Dennis had identified, he said, Kyle, you've got a doctoral level understanding of prayer, but you got to go get you got to get the credentials for that, man. So he actually encouraged me to go for the master's track as well. It's Franciscan University in Steubenville, Ohio, where you have taught.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just a little bit about us, as individuals. So Dennis has that. I'm almost done doing that as well. And when we started, it's actually been 2 years. East to West Theology has been
as
live.
Of January, right?
Yeah. We started on
Mother of God.
Yeah, January 1st, 2023, when Benedict XVI passed.
Right.
And
which is the circumcision of our Lord in the East, for those listening.
Indeed. Right. And but we'd really been recording almost the entire year before that. So it's been almost 3 years of podcasting experience, and it's just been incredible seeing how the Lord has interwoven this apostolate into our calling as husbands and fathers of our children. In fact, we also are the godfather of a child
both.
in each person's family.
Yes.
So, and also a member of the Igbo tribe in Africa together.
Nigeria.
Yes. So,
Are you for real?
oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, my wife's Nigerian, and
Oh, okay.
well, but we had a solemn ceremony actually that I became a member of the tribe.
Oh, a member of the tribe.
Dean, who is my best man, also an honorary member at the very least.
Oh, sure. No, I mean the tribe.
Oh, okay,
I'm a
gotcha.
full-blown member now.
You had the kola nut.
I had the kola nut.
Well, anyone listening in Africa, then he's official.
Indeed.
So you guys are stamped, huh?
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's
Pretty cool. Because at first I thought you were saying you had actual ancestry in the Igbo tribe, and I was like, and that shocked me. But then you said you're honorary members, which makes more sense. And Dennis, you married a Nigerian woman, so I get it now. I get the connection.
Right.
That's very cool, though. Very
if
cool.
It's by
indeed.
blood, who knows? I mean, I've heard someone say that almost every human being on Earth has some Semitic roots at this point, for example. So,
Right.
Could Igbo be in there as well? Who knows?
Yeah,
we do know for a fact that they are. Yeah, it's a DNA. It's the same DNA that the haplogroup Y. Those who know about haplogroup Y, that's also found in Nigeria, the only country in Africa where it's found. So
you heard it here.
Yeah,
there it is.
That's a little bit about us. And Dustin, we met you, of course, at the Catholic Creator Conference this year, and the rest is history, man. It was a great honor to meet you, and thank you so much for hosting us here now. So we spread the apostolate.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely, guys. It was a pleasure to meet you and a pleasure to have your friendship. And we have our kind of text group that we have with all the guys that we met at the conference, and it's a blessing to bounce stuff off one another, keep each other in prayer, encourage one another, and so forth. So I'm really grateful for your friendship, guys. Thank you.
Likewise.
So yeah, like, are you both cradle Catholics? Are you converts? What's your stories?
Yeah, so I'm a cradle Catholic. I grew up in the Byzantine Church, the Greek Catholic Church, and unfortunately, though, I didn't have really the best catechesis growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And also had a very difficult upbringing as well. I'm not going to get into that right now, all those details, but it was definitely a hard knock upbringing. But the one thing that we did was we, virtually went to Divine Liturgy every Sunday, and then occasionally went to a Roman Catholic church that I just went to today. That's unfortunately closing. But that is a huge blessing because that became a habit for me growing up to still go to Mass on Sunday or Divine Liturgy on Sundays, despite the, again, poor catechesis and the difficult upbringing that I had.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say that my grandparents and both sides of my family were both practicing. My father's side was Roman Catholic, mother's side was Greek Catholic. And so they helped me very much. I saw my grandparents, they pray the rosary every day. They had
Nice.
EWTN on every day. And I have to give credit where credit's due. I did learn a lot from watching EWTN growing up with Father Carapi and Mother Angelica at the time. And that actually led me to start to go to confession when I was in high school, because I actually didn't go to confession for several years up until that point. And when I finally did go, it was transformative, to say the least. I had a lot of sins, and I couldn't break them just by confessing to God alone, which I did every day.
Right.
But when I went to confession, I actually started having leaps and bounds of grace. And so to me, that just spoke volumes that I was actually seeing a breakage in the chains were breaking. So that led me to actually find out about a Franciscan university, which was also aired on EWTN. And I did go to Penn State originally. I went out of state to college, which I'm still paying the price for. But but yeah, I mean, it was a difficult experience there as well because of the secular nature of everything. But there was some light that was present, and the Catholic minister was a student or a former student at Franciscan. And he actually told me, hey, you should go to Franciscan. And I didn't really listen to him for a couple of years. And eventually I did. And yeah, that changed my life as well. So yeah, I mean, I did a lot of self-study in the faith. And yeah, eventually I started to grow more into my Eastern Catholicism, which I didn't really know much about besides going to Divine Liturgy. I was more educated in the West due to EWTN and due to Franciscan University. But I started to grow deeper into the East and self-study, and finally came to the realization that I need to live out my Eastern Catholicism as an obligation, right, to canon law, and to the fact that I was canonically Eastern, even though there was a priest that had told me I was Western, because he didn't know the specifics of the canon and my parental situation. And so I was actually living as a Westerner for a while, thinking I was Western, but then I eventually ended up finding the truth. So with all that being said, that's just a quick snapshot of just my faith journey. Oh, I forgot to mention one thing. My Western or Latin grandparents that were in Florida sent me a rosary in the mail, and how to pray it. And it was the grace of the Holy Spirit. This is before high school, I think, or right around the time of high school. It was the last time the Buffalo Bills beat the Houston Texans, which was around 2006. And we lost to him. We lost to him today, by the way. So
Too soon, man.
yeah. So with all that being said, I started praying the rosary every day. And that's what actually I believe led me to find out about going to confession and then going to confession. That was actually the first step. So, and then I started praying Divine Mercy Chaplet every day as well, maybe like a couple years later. So and then just recently, really, in my faith journey, I started praying the Jesus Prayer, the Chotki, which you can see on my own personal channel. I try to spread that in particular because, again, it's an Eastern prayer, and I want to grow deeper into my Eastern roots.
Yeah, and that's on Cherubim Creations, by the way.
Cherubim Creations, as the angel of cherubim. Yeah.
Make sure you guys check that out.
Is that the second highest angel in heaven?
Hierarchically, yes.
Yes.
After the seraphim, right?
Yeah, the seraphim are the angels of fire, like fire of charity, and the cherubim are the angels of light, the light of knowledge.
And that's according to the Thomistic and the Dionysian model. There is another model that exists.
There's debate about the hierarchies, you know.
So.
Same like archangel, that the archangels are the highest.
Yes,
you hear that sometimes.
Yep.
Yes, indeed. Well, thank you for sharing. So it's funny, like we have a lot of similarities in our faith journeys, and then also a lot of like mirror differences. So what do I mean by that? Hard knock life upbringing, similarly to Brother Dennis. I've been, more and more vocal about this. So Dennis mentioned we have our own side projects. He's got Cherubim Creations. I've got the Rich Dawn on my own channel, which is currently my namesake. And with the Rich Dawn, I'm starting to open up more, having different people on, including Dustin, who was recently on, if anybody wants to check that out after this. I've opened up about how my parents divorced since I was 2. So that really laid the groundwork of my upbringing in the faith, or lack thereof. So there was a lot of mixed messages, a lot of, what's going on in this household, what's going on in this household, what's going on in public school, what's going on getting raised by a bunch of different babysitters, and then what's going on in that religion class, the Confraternity of Christian Doctrine, the CCD as it's called. And so that was a pretty wild upbringing. I'm very, very thankful that my mother was always deeply, deeply grounded in singing in the choir, just a very simple soul. And so I definitely got some inklings of the faith, but I kind of more identify as an adult convert, even though I'm a cradle Catholic, because it wasn't until I was an adult that it really, really clicked. So, I mean, I was kind of like a self-proclaimed atheist by high school. Went off to college at the Rochester Institute of Technology, which is one of the top 3 computing schools in America. And so phenomenal education, but a lot of modernism. And fortunately, I was able to kind of intuit that a little bit. They start you out by picking your classes for you, your fall trimester. And I was put into Intro to Philosophy, which really became my first love, Philia Sophia, the love of wisdom. And they gave us like these slipshod snapshots of all these different, it started with like mostly Western thinkers.
Uh-huh.
You know, you learn the mnemonic devices like SPA. It was Socrates who taught Plato, who taught Aristotle, and all these other great thinkers. And here's where Dennis and I kind of have a reversal in our paths. I actually went Eastern in my youth,
Way east.
like way east. So I was actually very Eastern in my spirituality for the longest time, and then the Western came later.
Oh,
So
wow.
that happened in the form of well, actually, I had a near-death experience. That's actually a pretty critical piece of the life testimony. I had just finished freshman year of college. I had started reading a Bible. I threw it in a box as a concession to God when I carted off to college. And that philosophy course, like, opened up my mind to so many ideas that I was left to kind of put the jigsaw back together. Like, what is truth?
Mhm.
You know, quid est veritas. And so I'm reading the Bible now. And I was just like going from, you know, page 1 of Genesis all the way through when I was 19. And then I ended up being raptured. I was enveloped by the divine light. I always called it the white light for many, many years, but I had met with a mystical doctor of theology some years ago, and he put me through a fine-tooth comb. And after he, I guess you could say, diagnosed me, he said, from now on, you only ever call that the divine light, not the white light. So you had an encounter with the divine light. I wasn't here anymore. I was like gone, and in the body or out of the body, I know not. But then I came back to earth, and I was clutching my steering wheel, screaming, "No, God, please, no, not yet. People still need my help here." And then I embarked on about a decade of what was that? Like trying to like psychoanalyze, meta-analyze, whatever, like what was that experience? Why did those words come out of my mouth? And I ended up in the Far East because I signed on with that same professor who was the head of the religion department in my school, very high profile school, very high profile professor, head of the religion department, and a devout Buddhist, like hardcore Zen Buddhist. So I did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I did Eastern Asian philosophy coursework, and we did a deep dive into Confucianism, Taoism, you know, Lao Tzu's Tao Te Ching. I was reading the Bhagavad Gita, the different Vedas, Hinduism, or as they refer to it as the Sunata Dharma, the eternal teaching. And ultimately, I kind of rested in, just by virtue of what my professor was into, Soto school Zen Buddhism in the Mahayana tradition. So we were doing all this transcendental meditation, sitting on the Zafu pillow, and you know, trying to experience samsara and all these different things, or as some refer to as nirvana. And ironically, I was kind of, you know, I was running into these different New Agers and weird people, you know, great people throughout college, and they were like, "You're already enlightened. You're already enlightened." And they didn't know about my white light experience, but I was just like, "I don't know what you mean when you say that."
Your
It's
divine light.
well, yeah, well,
Back
yeah,
then, back then it was white Russians.
right. And what I found out was, I mean, obviously the devil was trying to lay snares and to get me to fall into pride. Because I mean, isn't that great to be like gods, but without the Catholic understanding of that?
Sure.
So I just went through this intense spiritual warfare, trying to put the pieces together, and then ultimately came home to the church because of the Blessed Virgin Mary. She arrested me and basically wouldn't let go of me until I was healed from almost a Protestantized understanding of the faith, certainly morally relativistic, because you're trying to, you know, you're trying to make all the different world religions true at the same time, which is kind of the trapping of New Age, that God's at the top of a mountain and there's more than one way up that mountain.
Yeah. To
the chagrin of Jesus saying, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. There's no way to the Father except through me." So by God's grace, I had that total conversion, thanks to the Blessed Mother. Got on the rosary daily. This was about 10 years ago now, and have never looked back.
Dude, that's crazy. I mean, and tomorrow being the feast of Our Lady of the Rosary is
Yes,
very
and
timely as
victory.
well. Yeah, very timely.
I guess right now it is in the vigil.
That's
Indeed,
it is.
indeed.
It is. It's the vigil, right? So yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's just break into a rosary.
Well,
That's the episode, folks.
it's
Yeah,
funny.
very
It's funny, Kyle, because I have a friend who's a convert from Buddhism as well as Eastern Orthodoxy. I think you guys would have an amazing conversation. Anyways, he was in the Tibetan tradition, which I think you were too, right? Mahayana is Tibetan, isn't it?
Not originally.
Not originally.
Not
Okay.
originally. So when Siddhartha Gautama in the 400s BC experienced enlightenment, he was born a prince of a noble family, and he experienced suffering in a bunch of different ways, and then he had his enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. And by the time he died, he started Buddhism. His disciples just kind of carried it on, and there was originally the Theravada school and the Mahayana school. And the Theravada school is this philosophy of that you strive to become what's called an arhat, which means that basically you're just trying to seek personal enlightenment.
Right.
I personally am more disposed, well, I was, to the Mahayana understanding, because you're striving to be what's called a bodhisattva. And instead of the way I remember it being described is like, if you're an arhat, you're on like a one-man kayak on the stream to enlightenment. But if you're a bodhisattva, you're in a canoe, and you're trying to bring as many people into the canoe with you as possible. And I would say, like, in a Catholic expression, it's like, being a hermit by yourself in the desert versus, whatever, like a founder of a religious order or whatever another corollary would be.
That's wild. And my friend was describing the chewed ritual, which a lot of people don't know about. And that's kind of you never associate Buddhism with anything dark, quote unquote. But that ritual is like, that's heavy stuff.
Oh, he brought demons into him.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Drinking out of skull cups, going into graveyards, all kinds of stuff, man. Stuff I had no idea about. Nobody in the West knows this stuff, right? They have this like watered down whitewash version of some like kumbaya kind of Buddhism, but they don't even really know what it is.
Right.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I'm not even familiar with that, to be honest. I didn't know he drank out of skulls.
Oh man, it's nuts. Like and you could talk about this better than me, Kyle, but you basically go into places where that would instill fear, and you kind of like give yourself over to these entities, and they kind of take hold of you, right? Is that
We've talked
accurate?
about this offline before, Dustin, and since I'm not from the Tibetan tradition, you actually know more about it through your friend than I do. But from what I remember you describing, yeah, I mean, there's this exchange, and what I can speak to with that is when we were doing Zazen, which is the meditation.
Right.
I remember at one point, I never revealed this before, but I remember at one point there was like, I could feel like entities trying to like take over when you just sit still for hours on end.
Right.
And that's one reason why that's, that practice in general is categorically incapable of being a corollary to Christian Catholic meditation, right? We refer to mental prayer in the vein of Teresa of Avila and Universal Doctrine of Prayer as level 2 of 9 of prayer, right? Level 2 is the doorway to the upper 7. And the fundamental difference between, Buddhist meditation and Catholic prayer is that your end in Buddhist meditation is nothingness. You're trying to like blank your mind out to a clean slate. But the thing is you could, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, but also idle hands are the work of the
devil's
devil.
workshop.
Yeah. If you just, if you're shooting for nothingness,
you're going to get something.
Jesus talks about that in scripture, and some people connect that with Buddhists, in that when Jesus says that a man who his house, he was basically possessed by a demon, when that demon leaves, right, and he cleans his house, but he doesn't fill it, right, with the Lord, then later on, several demons will come back, and the state of that man's soul will be worse than the first. So
Yeah,
that
that's
either
true.
makes me think, okay, you got rid of the demons, but you didn't invite the God of the universe in, and therefore now the demons are going to come back and take control. So yeah, I kind of meditate on that as well. And I wanted to just bring up maybe like, the Wim Hof. I know that's on the lower level of things, but some people, I heard I don't know, a demonologist, but they're an expert on New Age. And they were claiming that, even like the Wim Hof can open the doors up to demonic. And me having done that for years, I tried to incorporate, because I know you and I had the idea separately. You had it first, but they incorporate, the Jesus prayer into Wim Hof, which I did. But I did experience what I thought was demonic obsession from that point.
And what's Wim Hof, Dennis? Like I've never heard that term before. What is that?
That's Kyle Dean would know more than me. I don't want to take what you know as being.
Well, no,
yeah.
I mean, I guess I can give a quick answer, but then I'll lob it back to you. Yeah. So, because I've been talking a fair amount, but Wim Hof is this gentleman who's gotten like 20 something world records. He's the Iceman. He had a wife that was schizophrenic, and she tragically committed suicide, and he was in such despair that he was doing really intense practices to try to reclaim his own, holistic well-being. And so he actually submerged himself in very cold water, and he realized that it helped him to really ground his mind. And he ran with it. He kept going and going and going. And then he ended up breaking all these world records because he's known as the Iceman, and he can withstand frigid temperatures for prolonged periods of time in and out of water. And then he developed, it's funny that you even bring this up, Dennis, because I've been meaning to actually touch on this at some point publicly, that the Wim Hof, I mean, he can't take credit.
He can't take credit
for that at all. And he's the first person to say that. I've seen him say that on interviews. He's actually taking from the Vedas. The Vedas in the Sunata Dharma, Hinduism,
in the Himalayas, right?
Is where, it's where, breath work comes from, and some connected to yogic work. And in that sense, I would say, beware, because obviously yoga in general is invoking Hindu deities, which St. Paul would refer to as demons, right? In the book of Romans, chapter 1, because any of the gods of the Gentiles or the pagans, however you want to qualify it, any that are not the true God, are demonic in nature, as our faith teaches. So, but he does this like what he coins as the Wim Hof is just 30 breaths, like you're basically doing like a hyperventilating exercise immediately followed by a hypoventilating exercise, where on an out breath you hold it for as long as you can, and then you do 15 seconds in breath and keep going. And I would say anybody who's hearing this, like, just be very cautious, because you have to kind of be a practitioner to know how to do this effectively. You can, if you were in a body of water, if you were even standing or walking or God forbid driving, you don't ever do something like this. You only ever do it if you're sitting or lying down. And there's even been some cases of people getting like tinnitus or in their ears if they're not careful. But that being said, he's also subjected himself to scientific study, and he's been like injected with E. coli and then did the advanced breath work, and like his body killed the E. coli. So there's definitely something there in terms of, they would refer to it as prana, energy force.
Right.
I would, the Catholic corollary to that would be the Holy Spirit, ruach, right? The Hebrew for spirit, breath. And that's why, I coined or dubbed, the King's Prayer, which is a similar breath work exercise. I kind of started doing this in 2007, long before. I mean, I discovered Wim Hof in 2019 and showed it to some people, but
COVID time.
Actually, it was an Eastern priest who said it's okay. You're advanced enough in the faith that you can look into this stuff and baptize it.
And maybe he's watching right now because he is subscribed.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah. And so, anyways, that's to answer your question.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But yeah, I was doing the Jesus Prayer since 2012, and then later on started taking on more Western things.
Wow, interesting.
And then when I had my full conversion, I started going just about exclusively to the traditional Latin Mass. So it was, we breathe with both lungs of the one Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. We've got the Eastern lung and the Tridentine Western lung, which is kind of a cool combination.
Yeah, it's what percentage of that in the church is that?
Tridentine?
Mm-hmm. I know you told me recently.
Maybe one. It's like 0.1%.
Right.
0.1% or so.
That low?
Yeah, well, because you figure, according to the SSPX website, and they're not in full communion, but there's 600,000 of them registered. And then between the different diocesan, former indult masses, now oratories, oftentimes in the wake of Traditionis Custodes. And then with the, Fraternal Society of St. Peter and Institute of Christ the King and a bunch of the smaller traditional orders, that generally makes up maybe about 1 million. So, I mean, altogether, it could be under 2 million.
Wow.
Whereas all of Eastern Catholicism is 15 million.
Right.
So either way you slice it, remnant maybe.
Yeah. And Ukraine was the largest Eastern Catholic country in the world because of the war and how many people are dying. It's really another assault on the East. I mean, it's just, Lord have mercy. Christ have mercy, Lord have mercy. But it's definitely going to change. It has changed the dynamics there as well. So,
Dennis, if you were Eastern this whole time, like what's your ethnic background?
I am Irish German and then half Ukrainian.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I see.
But my family did a DNA test on either side, so we found that we had some Scandinavian, so Viking on the Irish German side. No surprise, as they invaded the English Isles.
Right.
And then on my Ukrainian side, we found out that we have a lot of I think a little bit of Moldovan. And then surprisingly, we had very small amount of Indian, like Bangladesh, and also Levantine. So
wow, that's quite a mix. That's fascinating.
Yeah, it is.
Indeed.
So when we talk about the East, and we talked about the Jesus Prayer, I think one devotion that doesn't get enough spotlight, and I think it should, is the prayer rule of the Mother of God.
The Molybden?
Not the Molybden, the prayer rule of the Theotokos. It's attributed to Saint Seraphim of Seraph, but it was one of his disciples that actually started doing it. He claimed that Saint Seraphim would pray, the Eastern Hail Marys. He would pray 150 of those, and then and that's similar to the Western Rosary, because originally it was 150 Aves without any mysteries or any interjections of any other prayers. It was just 150 Aves. So this Eastern saint apparently did the same thing on the Eastern side, and then later on they added interspersed prayers and actually mysteries as well. So it's really cool to see that that parallel running. But yeah, it's a really cool, if you guys get a chance to look it up. It's prayer rule of the Theotokos.
Yeah. Kyle, Dean, and I we have plans to do that one. We were going to, and then we didn't end up panning out.
We did an episode, one of our early episodes, on the Eastern Hail Mary to spread awareness of that. A lot of people have no idea.
Yeah, but no, I was referring to something that we haven't released yet. But the prayer session we had, we were going to include the Eastern Rosary, which is what you're referring to from Saint Seraphim. Anyway, yeah. So he actually, as far as I know, he got the idea though from the West. He liked how the West was so devoted to the Rosary that he wanted to also honor Our Lady in a special way, and he developed his own set of mysteries there that are really awesome. I've prayed it. I don't usually pray that one. I usually because that came later, didn't it? It came about 19th century, 18th century?
It's pretty recent. Yeah.
So I mean, that's my church was already in full communion with Rome from the 16th century. So yeah, we didn't really develop that. We just kept the Western Rosary. But I prayed that Eastern Rosary before, and I thought it was very fruitful.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So I'd like to do that soon.
Yeah, it's a wonderful devotion. Yeah, I have an appreciation for Eastern spirituality as well, but I don't know. Liturgically, I just feel more at home in the Latin tradition. That's just preference, though. Nothing. It's all beautiful, regardless of
Right. So,
whatever rite it is. But yeah, I just feel more comfortable, I guess, in a simple Western liturgy. I've been to Eastern liturgies when I was discerning Orthodoxy, and it was definitely beautiful. There was a lot going on. A lot of Lord have mercies. I think I lost count of how many.
Yes.
Yeah, but it was beautiful.
Yeah. It is. I mean, and I don't want to just make people think that the East is simply Byzantine. There are 5 major patriarchates in the East, right? So you have, the Byzantine, you have the Alexandrian, Antiochian, you have one based in Jerusalem, right?
Ruthenian.
Ruthenian's under the Byzantine.
Okay.
No, that's the Byzantine umbrella.
Got it.
The 5 major patriarchates. So, well, I should say 4 in the
expert.
4 in the East and 1 in the West, which would be Rome.
Right.
That's Orthodox. What they believe is that they were all equal. All 5 were equal.
The
And that
Pentarchy, right?
Then Rome started getting like a ego trip, but we don't believe that. We believe that that Rome was always the head, and we have a lot of evidence for that in the early church fathers and examples of where Rome would intercede between 2 patriarchates like Alexandria's fighting with Jerusalem. They don't call out to Constantinople. They don't call out to Antioch. They call out to Rome. And so
Right.
underneath those umbrellas, you have the different rites. So you have the Ruthenian, Ukrainian, Greek Catholic under like the Byzantine rite or umbrella or patriarchate. And so anyway, the Ukrainian, Greek Catholic, and Ruthenian came back in union at the Synod of Brest in the 16th century with Saint Josaphat, who is a martyr for East and West.
And I just want to take a pause for a second. Father Deacon Rick is in the chat. He said the East loves you, Dustin. I love you, Father Deacon. We've had some great conversations, and Father Deacon Rick actually has some cool little YouTube videos out. One was the Eternal Virgin, which I thought was very, very beautiful. So if anyone wants to type that into YouTube, it's a few minutes, maybe 5 minutes or so, but it's a beautiful reflection. So glad you're here, Father Deacon. Thanks for stopping by. So the Union of Brest, what brought that about? Like, was it something that was organic? Was it something that was kind of forced from the outside? Because, a lot of Eastern Christians say that Eastern Catholicism is very artificial. It's kind of like a Frankenstein. It's not really authentically Eastern. So how would you respond to that?
Well, I would say that, there is a lot of evidence that there were superficial reasons for it.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Rome granting power and whatnot, wealth to the Eastern churches. But no, my understanding, and you can go to Father Sharon's video. He gave us 2 icons, Kyle, Dean, and I, and we had him on our channel as well. We went to visit him after the failed assassination attempt from former President Trump. But we went to visit him after that, and I remember on one of his videos, he was explaining how, or maybe it was in person offline, I forget, but he was explaining how there was a solid reason to the East coming back in union. And it was because they saw the authenticity of Rome from the early church. The evidence was there. And in fact, the entire hierarchy, like the bishops, came back in union with Rome there at the Synod or Council of Brest. But it was actually the priests and laity that ended up forming the Orthodox Church, or I should say they stayed Orthodox. And in fact, it's very interesting. Now think about this. Now here's a thought experiment. Imagine, okay, you're in, what diocese are you in, Dustin?
London.
London. Oh, really? Okay, cool. So yeah, London. I drive up there very often.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of drivers from London that I meet.
You're gonna have to go visit.
Yeah, you got to come visit, bro.
Well, yeah, I could end up doing that Detroit trip I was telling you about offline.
Right.
So that's a real possibility.
Yes.
But anyway, so imagine, okay, you're in the Diocese of London, right? Now imagine all of Canada. Imagine the entire Catholic Canadian Church is becoming Orthodox. Like all of the bishops, like Bishop of London, Bishop of Toronto, Archbishop here, which is close to us, hour and a half from Toronto. Vancouver, et cetera. They all become they're all like, you know what, we're going to join the Greek Catholic, or I'm sorry, the Greek Orthodox Church.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's what was happening in the reverse at the Council of Brest. But the priest and the laity basically said no. Right. And in fact, I think once a lot of them had come back, a lot of the bishops or patriarchs that have come back to their town, they're actually killed and martyred.
Oh,
It's unfortunate.
Yeah, by their people.
this
So
kind of
imagine,
this kind of reminds me of isn't that kind of like how Florence was? Like the bishops that were at Florence kind of like they accepted the terms of union, and when they got back, the laity
right?
were not in
Period.
favor of that at all, and they totally rejected it. And then they were like, okay, I guess we can't do this. But that's kind of
Did they kill them? Like, did they actually murder them?
I don't know if it got that
That's
serious, but I know they put pressure on the hierarchs, and they backed out. But it was a grassroots thing where they're like, no, we don't want this union. But the hierarchy at the council did.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting to see that as well. So that was kind of like the union of Brest is in a sense too.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just, I don't know how to explain it. Obviously, I wasn't there. I didn't have connection with those people, but I wonder what led them to such disfavor, right? To actually do that. And so what's interesting now is you have the patriarch or the Orthodox Church of Russia, Russian Orthodox Church. They don't actually gain their tradition from the original Greek Catholics, right? They actually had, because of what happened, they actually had to go to the Holy Land to have an Orthodox bishop because they had no leadership, right?
Right.
The leadership joined forces with Rome. And so they had to go and seek out a bishop from the Holy Land, which I believe came from either the Jerusalem church or the Alexandrian church. I can't say if it was one of the three patriarchates there.
Mm.
And so their tradition has a lot of those traditions that you'll find in, again, either Alexandrian, Antiochian, or the Jerusalem church, not the actual Byzantine or Constantinopolitan church, right?
This is the Russian church you're talking about.
Right. Correct. And so what's interesting, and now look at history again. They're having issues. The Russian Orthodox Church is no longer in full communion with the
Alexandria, right?
With Constantinople.
And Constantinople as well. But they didn't they also break communion with Alexandria? Because I don't know if this was the main catalyst, but I know the Alexandrian patriarchate had and this has been going on for years, but I guess they recently ordained a deaconess, and the ceremony, the ordination was identical to that of an ordained male deacon. Like there was no differentiation between like sacramental and non-sacramental. And I think that scandalized a lot of people. And I think that might have pushed Russia's buttons as well. But yeah, I didn't know that there was all this cross-pollination with the Holy Land and Eastern traditions. I thought it was, I had no idea. That's really interesting.
Oh, it is. Yeah, it's fascinating, the history behind all of it. So yeah, I mean, that's why the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church right now, I mean, in real time, they're having issues with, I mean, obviously with Russia, with the war, but then you have like the Ukrainian Orthodox Church that has been banned in Ukraine. That's a whole nother story, but we believe as Ukrainian Greek Catholics, we have the original tradition from Constantinople, right? But the Russians don't. And it's really strange how all that works. So, but to answer your question succinctly, of course, we believe it was an authentic union. Again, the hierarchy accepted it, but it was just a matter of the laity. And then, of course, the priests are part of the hierarchy as well. Some of them chose to revolt against it. So, yeah. And then again, we have St. Josephat as well as a living martyr, right, to testify to that.
Wow. So I've heard some polemics against Saint Jehoshaphat. Some Easterners, at least online that I've encountered, say that he's a murderer, and they make all these charges against him. But so he was
So was St. Paul and King David.
right.
Although if they're saying he did it
I don't have any evidence
as a practicing Catholic, then that would be an important distinction.
I have no evidence of that.
Yeah, I've never seen that either, but that's just a claim I've seen kind of parroted about in some circles. But so he was Orthodox, and he came into full communion. What was his story? Why was he martyred? How was he martyred?
Right. Well, I don't really have all those details right now, but I do know that he did represent that union, right? In the what was called the Rzeczpospolita in Polish, which is the Polish Commonwealth, or Lithuanian Polish Commonwealth, that encompassed that entire region there of Ukraine, Poland, Russia that we know today, Kiev and Rus, right? And he again, that's a great question, whether he was himself an Orthodox bishop that came in union, or was he already Catholic that gathered the Orthodox bishops. I'm not actually familiar with that early history of his life, but what I do know is he ended his life being beheaded with an axe. That's why you see him with an axe, and I think he was thrown into the river there. It may have been, I'm not sure if it was the Dnipro River or not, but it's very tragic, right, how that happened. But obviously, the blood of the martyrs is the seat of the church. So,
amen. Well, Saint Jehoshaphat, pray for us.
Pray for us.
And pray for union.
Amen.
So Kyle, we've talked about this before, sort of off air, but you have experience with like spiritual warfare and deliverance in your kind of ministry, right?
That's right. Yep. That started. So actually, I mentioned how Our Lady kind of got me on the straight and narrow. There was something pretty wild that happened. If people want to check out on my channel, I did a live talk recently on this in detail, entitled "Breaking Free," New Age and occultism and different topics like that. Because in that quest of seeking the truth and figuring out what I believed and what that white light was and all of this other stuff, at one point I was dating a pagan, because I just didn't have any clarity or recognition that being unevenly yoked in that way is spiritually dangerous and a problem. Until, as I was continuing to learn about these different Marian apparitions, I started growing a deep devotion to Our Lady Guadalupe. And all of a sudden, one night, I had actually bought this Guadalupe comforter at a local, famous flea market that shut down after many decades. On the weekend, they shut down, and I'm a kind of a sentimental guy, so I'll hold on to something for a while and not touch it until the right moment. And this was one of those situations. I was convicted at work by a separated brother in Christ, a Methodist Christian, and he asked me in the break room, how are you today? I was like, yeah, I'm doing pretty good. And he's like, how are you really doing? Went deep. And I was just like, well, man, I'm dating this pagan. I think I love her. I didn't really know what love was back then, but I'm feeling God pull me in another. And he's like, whoa, 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 stop. You're dating a pagan? Get out right now. And he convicted my heart. So that night I opened the comforter for the first time. And I draped myself literally, physically in the mantle of Mary.
Wow.
My Lady Guadalupe.
Yeah, passed out. And then, have you seen the Boondock Saints, Dustin?
You know what? To be honest, I haven't. Sorry.
And that's fine. It's filthy. I don't recommend it anyways. It's
okay.
There's some cool scenes.
But yeah, there's this one scene towards the beginning where the brothers had this quasi enlightenment moment where they just got gripped out of their sleep, and they had this aha. I literally had that moment that night. I got jolted out of my sleep. And next thing I know, I'm staring up at an ugly, disgusting gray demon in its true demon form, whispering incantations to my girlfriend. And I was terrified, absolutely terrified. You read this throughout the writings of the church. Whenever you encounter, even if it's an angel, like you can get so afraid that almost as to almost be paralyzed to death. And that's why they always end up saying, be not afraid whenever they show up.
Yeah.
And, but this guy didn't care. I mean, he was not on the winning team. And that jolted me heavily. And that was really actually my conversion, because, being a male with a male brain, I'm like, I got an issue here. I got to like fix it.
Got to
like,
solve it. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a nail. I need a hammer. But what do? I mean, I wasn't catechized yet. So I was just like, well, I think you're supposed to pray. And I told, this individual all about everything that was happening, because, we were both nuts. So she was just like, oh, okay. I guess that happened. And, in the next week, I prayed over her while she was sleeping. Again, sounds so weird, and it is weird, but I told her all about it. But when I did that, all I knew to do was just try an Our Father.
Yeah.
So I start saying an Our Father, and I couldn't get more than a couple of lines into the prayer without feeling evil pushing back on me, and she starts convulsing in her sleep. And so this happened one night, and then this happened again another night. So, the former atheist in me is like so good at just ruling out the natural and not just preternaturalizing or supernaturalizing things. So I was like genuinely like, okay, maybe I'm nuts. Like maybe I was just in a hypnagogic state when I woke up that night. It's that state between wakeful and dreaming.
Right.
But then after seeing her have this physiological reaction twice, and I was praying in my head. It's not like it was some psychosomatic, like she's like subconsciously hearing my prayer in her sleep or anything like that.
Yeah.
Which would really be kind of a stretch anyways, but whatever, for the sake of posterity and however anybody might want to try to break this down with their own interpretation. It had to be after the second time, because it wouldn't have made sense to keep going after this happened. But I had a triple infusion of knowledge in my intellect, like came from out of nowhere, came from without. And later I learned through studying spiritual theology, like what that is in terms of scientifically. And, because scientia is knowledge, right? Like, of course, this is why we rely on the philosophical sciences like epistemology, logic, and things like that to be effective in waging spiritual war. And this was the origins of me, recognizing it all, because what popped in my head was, one, everything in the Bible is so legit. It's so real. Ephesians 6, right? The battle is not with the flesh, it's with powers and principalities. In other words, none of us are each other's enemy, like at all. Like
Right.
There's this invisible force, between good and evil that's, vying for our souls. Second was, whatever I'm trying to do, like I'm not in control. I'm feeling this pushback. I don't understand the mechanics of it. Back off. Like you reassess later. And of course, that's when I, learned about the authority structure and that there is a distinction between power and authority. Even in some Catholic charismatic movements, they get this wrong, which is very concerning, because, you really need to understand the mechanics of all of this. So I had an initial, you basically just got exposed to something here, but reassess later. And then the third, and all of this was instantaneous. The third was the most important, which was, as much as you're trying to do a good thing right now, you can't just will the evil out of somebody, like, especially when they're not even awake. That's not how this works. Like this soul, this daughter needs to have a conscious walk with her creator, with her father, God the Father, and have that conversion journey that way. So to answer your question succinctly, within a couple of years after that, I happened to be at a local conference with the exorcist for the diocese. After he gave this whole spiel and everybody's like just gripping on his every word, I went up on the break and I was like, listen, man, like not only do I already know everything you already just said, because I'm so versed in this already, I've done so much research, but I kind of think that I might be called to help in this ministry.
Mm.
And he immediately was like, yeah, I think so. I mean, he's got his, certain gifts and intuition himself. He gave me a chance, brought me onto the team, and the rest was history. I've been active ever since.
So have you assisted in exorcisms at all?
That's not something that I have faculties to get into
Okay.
at this time.
Okay. I know they have like a prayer team might be a trite way of putting it, but they have certain people who pray during the exorcism, right? And it's lay people a
It
lot of the
can
time.
be.
It can be, yeah.
Yeah, it's a very, active in prayer, but otherwise passive role. And, being a bodyguard, of course, anybody whose presence, one of your primary duties is to protect the exorcist and the energumen. And,
Yeah.
but, I'm a deliverance minister, and, my, main focus, I've been involved in all aspects of the ministry, but I'm an intake specialist. We bring people in, we ascertain, is it psychological? Is it spiritual? Is it both? And we have a team of healthcare professionals, like psychologists, mental health, medical field, doctors, and then a team of clergy. So it's a very comprehensive uh, ministry.
Wow, that's incredible. So that's one thing I love about being Catholic is the intersection and the harmony between faith and reason. And what you're just saying right now, I mean, if let's say a charismatic evangelical was listening and they're hearing about this, right? They're hearing about spiritual warfare. Um, a lot of times, like phrases like team of healthcare professionals or mental health professionals doesn't even enter the equation, right? But it's cool to just see how we vet everything. We don't automatically assume, oh, there's a demon under every rock. We deal with reality, right? And
Right.
reality is multivalent. It's not always black and white or clear cut. You have to do some digging. And God gave us reason and logic to use it. And he also gave us a spirit as well. So yeah, that's really cool. And I think a lot of people don't know that about the Catholic Church, that we really value reason. And especially when it comes to the demonic, we're discerning. So like, how would you, for example, because I would imagine some cases of possession or obsession, they would kind of mimic or mirror some kind of mental health issues as well. So sometimes it would probably be hard to discern between the two. Um, just in a minute or a couple minutes, could you tell us like how would you do that? How would you go about separating the mental health issues from something that's preternatural? Like how would you do that?
Utilizing the tools of philosophy and theology and discernment. So, St. Thomas Aquinas talks about how all the different degrees are subalternated into each other. And the way to tell if a degree is higher than another degree is to ask, are we borrowing from reality somewhere else beyond our first principles? So if you look at an engineering degree, for example, at a certain point, they just accept certain things as given. And that's because it's subalternated to a physics degree, which is subalternated to a mathematics degree,
Hmm.
which is subalternated to a philosophy degree. And philosophy is the highest of the natural sciences because it's the highest way by which man can ascertain the light of natural reason, right? To its highest extent. And the top of philosophy would be metaphysics, right? So utilizing those sciences, that's why I kind of touched on it earlier, actually. It's different than the empirical sciences, right? Like, let's go back down to mathematics for a second. Math is spiritual. And I like to actually demystify this for people sometimes. Like, a really, really basic definition for the spiritual is the immaterial. Anything that's
Right.
immaterial, right? So that's why the scientific method is the golden standard for all of the empirical sciences that come below. But there reaches a point in the realm of philosophy where, and in mathematics, where you transcend the scientific method. And I would hazard to guess that those same people that you're saying that are, this might be new for them, they unless you have an understanding of that reality and can work within those mechanics, you're going to have a hard time being able to discern between psychological and spiritual. And from there, I mean, that's not something I could give a quick answer on. I mean, but it's all going to depend on, obviously you've got the DSM, right? The latest DSM is the Diagnostic Statistic Manual of Mental Disorders is the 5th revision is out now.
Right.
And, you can break it down depending on, what the diagnosis is. Because a lot of times some clients have a pre-existing diagnosis. We would need to understand that. We take very seriously working hand in hand with the healthcare professionals that are already involved, as well as the pastor, ideally, right? If he's on board because he has spiritual authority. And, like, for example, with dissociative identity disorder, there would be certain patterns that you would look for that help you to determine whether it's of psychological origin or of spiritual origin.
And
a lot of that has to do with, the prayer regimen and paying attention to the responses.
Something I heard from Jimmy Aiken is that the number one thing that deciphers the two would be when they bring in, let's say they have 10 hosts, one is consecrated, and nobody knows which one it is besides the priest holding it. And it's only when it gets to the actual consecrated host, which is Jesus Christ himself, body, blood, soul, and divinity, that the energumen, the possessed person, ends up convulsing or having a reaction verbally, whatever it may be. And this can also be not only with our Lord in the Eucharist, but also with holy objects that are blessed, that only they know which ones are blessed,
right.
Like miraculous medals, we'll say. And when it gets to the blessed one, which again, only the priest knows, then they react. And so we can know for a fact that it can't be psychological.
Right. And I mean, other things like speaking languages that they didn't otherwise know, and things like that. Aversion to the holy, like you said, Dennis. Yeah. Yeah, man, this is so interesting. Like I could just talk about this all day. We're going to have to do maybe another episode on, I don't know, spiritual warfare or the spiritual realm or something like that. Like this is so fascinating. So Dennis, so you taught at Steubenville, right?
Correct.
What was your area of expertise?
I taught basic Catholicism 101. I taught Christology, to be more specific. So Christology, which included soteriology, which is the study of Christ, of who he is and what he is, and then how he saves us, which is soteriology from soter. And then I also taught,
So like fundamental theology, when you say Catholicism 101?
Foundations of Catholicism, to be more specific. It was literally 101. And then but I taught also the Christology, which was also a master's course, as well as undergrad, a prereq for the master's students, which was my favorite course teaching on. And I would say I liked them all. But and then what else did I teach? I think. Oh yes, I'm forgetting now. It's been some years. PBS 1, which is Old Testament, Principle of Biblical Studies 1. So Old Testament. So we focus a lot on the Torah and and also the other books as well, like the wisdom literature and things like that.
Oh, that's awesome. So when you did your master's dissertation, was it geared towards like Christology?
So we had an option in our master's program to either do that dissertation, which some of my friends did, and they have their books published right now at the Steubenville Library at Franciscan. And I chose to go with the examination form. So I had several professors give me exams on basically the entire course load that they taught. So I wrote so much that I felt like my fingers were coming off. So, but yeah, it was basically it was a dissertation in a matter of one day.
Wow. I didn't even know that was an option. I just thought you had to do a dissertation and that was like standard across the board. That's really interesting.
Yeah. No, it's just an examination form. So it was good. I like that more, but if I ever go for my PhD, obviously I'll have to actually write a dissertation. So.
Yeah, for sure. And how did you guys, before we wrap up, just want to know, how did you guys how did you guys link up and become friends, and find that you had like a kindred spirits in each other, and you're on the same team, and you're fighting the good fight? How did this all mesh together and come together?
Right around the corner from here.
Yeah, well, without giving
Yeah.
without doxing ourselves here.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, we met at an abortion mill, and
Wow.
yeah, it actually, if I may, real quickly, this is a great story.
Sure.
So
Sure.
my introduction to the pro-life movement and praying for the unborn outside of a mill and all of that came thanks to my wife. She when we were dating in 2016, so this was my conversion with the Blessed Mother straightening me out was 2014, and so a couple short years later, she's given me Abby Johnson's book, Unplanned,
Wow.
which breaks down her conversion story and how she worked for Planned Parenthood to being a pro-life activist. And I'm reading this book. My girlfriend's out of town for the weekend. I was like, oh, I miss you. I was like a romantic sap. And she's like, go on an adventure, will you? Just go do something. Why don't you go to the mill? And it was my first time ever going to the mill, the same one that we met at. And as I got there and I was praying, one of the mothers came up to me and another pro-lifer there, and she was like, I just want you guys to know that because you were out here, I was scheduled for my abortion today, and I decided to keep. And by the way, I'm bearing twins.
Oh, wow.
So we were witness to the first, what I found out was the first double save in the history of the Buffalo pro-life movement. Like the day I showed up, and I've been many, many times, and I've never had anybody come up. I've actually heard this is a common phenomenon.
Wow.
I was speaking with one of the pro-life leaders in our region, and they're like, yeah, people will oftentimes have that happen the first time they come, and then it doesn't ever happen again. So I don't know what that was all about, but there's some special history there, including us meeting a couple years after that. And then we got involved in young adult ministry, as I had said. And it's funny. Dennis at first was kind of like, he was just kind of like monitoring how I do as a ministry leader, just silently. He's already chilling with his masters. And at first he was like, we'll see what this guy knows. But as he got to know me better and better and better, he discovered that, like himself, I'm what some might refer to as red-pilled.
Yeah.
And he was like, wait a minute, man, like, the issues, like there is.
Yeah, I was surprised.
He was like, dude, I wouldn't have expected that, because you don't find that too often in young adult ministry.
Right.
Yeah. And I had just moved back to Buffalo. Actually, at that time, I was living out in, while I was in Steubenville, of course, teaching. I moved back to Buffalo for a brief time, and then I left to Georgia to live there with my friend. And then I moved back to Buffalo again. And that's when I met Kyle Dean. But what's interesting is I really didn't have any Catholic friends here at all that I know of. Maybe maybe someone that I knew from maybe people I knew but I wasn't close with. A Franciscan that lived up here too. But I actually watched a movie from Abby Johnson, Unplanned.
Oh, that's
and
interesting.
I had never gone to abortion mill. I think maybe once in Pittsburgh, but I've never actually like gone to the capacity, I suppose, that I did here, because I was always just so disturbed by it. I guess I'm a sensitive soul. So I was very disturbed that I didn't even want to be in the presence of it to help pray, because I just felt like I need to do something here, So, but her movie said that like 70+% of the time that someone's praying out an abortion mill, that the mother decides to keep the baby. And that's the statistics that Planned Parenthood doesn't want to know. Oh. And so I had watched that movie that weekend before, and I met some Catholic friends, like our friend Aaron, and I was with my friend from Franciscan that was visiting, Stephen. And so I was inspired. I'm like, you know what? I want to go to abortion mill and pray, and I was totally against it. I was like allergic to it. And I went, and that's where I met Kyle Dean. And what's interesting is, we both were inspired by Abby Johnson.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. Guys, you know what? We're going to have to put a pin on it for right now, but let's pick this up again and do a part 2, because I really enjoyed this, and I could do this all night if I had the chance. But let's put a pin on it right now, and we will resume at a later time, hopefully not too far in the future, so we can just go off the momentum that we've got here right now, which is awesome. And I really appreciate you guys coming on and doing this with me. It's fantastic. I appreciate you both. Just want to thank you. So yeah, they can find you guys East to West Theology, right? And you each have your own channels as well.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, want to give a final plug?
Yeah, Cherubim Creations, as in the one of the angelic choirs, and then
Yeah, and I've got the Rich Dawn. So I'm a certified life coach, a Catholic life coach, and if anybody wants to plug in and get involved with those services deeper, you can check out therichddawn.com.
Fantastic. Well, thank you guys again, and God bless you, and happy feast of Our Lady of the Rosary. Guys, you've been tuned into Holy Smoke, Cigars, Catholicism, and Conversation. Let my prayer arise in thy sight as incense. I'm your host, Dustin Quick, and this was episode 120, East to West Theology with Dennis G. and Kyle Dean. We will see you guys soon and hopefully do that part 2, and it'll be great. So thank you guys, and have a good night, everyone. God bless.
God bless.
God bless.